You're listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, featuring senior retail executives and experts in the global convenience and mobility industry.
Welcome to the Future of Convenience podcast. I'm Dan Munford, and today I'm joined by a guest co-host with me today, Elaine Kanak, Chief Marketing Officer at Vontier, and a regular guest, Elaine, on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me back again. Great to be here.
Well, it's always nice to talk, and we've got a special guest today, haven't we, Elaine? We're joined by a man who needs little introduction, I think, to our listeners. Frank Gleeson is the president and CEO of the Convenience Industry's premier trade association, as we all know and love it, NACS, based in Washington, D.C. And we're going to be talking to Frank today and get his take on the future of the global industry, but also, and I think he's been traveling pretty much nonstop for 6 months in the US. I think it's going to be really interesting, Elaine, just to get Frank's take on where the US industry is as well. In his just over the 6 months at NACS at the helm. So that's going to be very interesting. And our other guest today, and a lead sponsor of our Best Convenience Store in the World competition, which is coming up, kicking off next week, is Joe Heather, who's the GM Northern Europe at Deliverect. And of course, Deliverect, very appropriate sponsor for this competition, because they're sitting right at the heart of this technology interface between retailers and the food service customer. So we'll be talking to Joe as well on this call. I spend a lot of time talking with senior operators, and the question has changed. It's no longer just whether the network works, it's whether it lets you scale the technologies that actually move the P&L. That's where Mako Networks stands apart. Beyond secure, compliant networking for fuel and convenience, Mako built the Makoverse. The Makoverse is a way for operators to deploy and scale things like retail media, video analytics, and in-store applications across hundreds of sites without rebuilding the network every time. Less friction, faster rollouts, real impact. Learn more at makonetworks.com. So I'm super excited to talk with you, Frank, on the podcast. But before we jump in, Elaine, would you reintroduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and and about Vontier too. And also just reference, we've just done the smartest store. That's our last competition. Lots of headlines about that. Just perhaps reference how you felt about that result just a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for having me here. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Vontier. We offer a range of different solutions to the convenience retail industry, from our brands Gilbarco Veeder-Root and Venco, which is a sponsor of the Smartest Store, as well as DRB and Drives. And I just loved this competition because it was really about introducing technology in innovative ways to elevate the consumer experience and to drive revenue growth and productivity enhancements. And that's really what is core of what we do at Vontier, is really using technology solutions to help our customers really realize sort of growth and efficiency. And there was a lot of really innovative things. We saw robotics, we saw RFID being used, we saw a range of different technologies being implemented to really make the transaction as seamless and consumer-centric as possible.
Yeah, 100%. I just can't stop thinking about Galbots in the Family Mart store, and having this robotic store clerk. Even though that entry didn't win, I mean, a lot of them made a big impact, I think, on the industry, got the industry thinking, and that's, of course, Elaine, that's the goal, and really appreciate Invenco's support on this competition. And I think it's going to be very exciting next year in 2027.
I agree. And I thought some of the really data-driven approaches that these retailers were using was really, really interesting, and can't wait to see what happens next year.
No, absolutely. Things are moving fast. Now, Frank, you've been patiently waiting there. You know the show. You've been on the show as a co-host with me many times, but you're in the hot seat today, and we want to fire some questions at you, if that's okay.
Absolutely, Dan. I'm thrilled to be with you guys again. I'm a big fan of this podcast. I love the work you're doing, and I've got lots of stuff I want to share with you from my experiences of the last 6 months, where I've been pretty much out traveling nonstop. So I've got a lot of maybe opinions and things I'd like to share with your listeners.
Absolutely. Well, we've known each other. I think we met when you were at Statoil in Ireland, which was the early days of food convenience, Frank, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we probably didn't even have convenience stores in Ireland those days. So we had the first ones coming in, and I do remember the journey well with you. And we've come a long way, Dan, a long way.
Absolutely. So, just perhaps you could just tell me a little bit about just if we can in a snapshot capture your last 6 months, because you've been to really sort of dug into where the US industry is over the last 6 months, spoken to probably hundreds, thousands of retailers across that period of travel. What are the big sort of big pointers from your point of view?
Yeah, Dan, listen, I've been on a listening tour. So kind of pretty much started with Chicago last year, kind of getting out, start meeting people, and absorbing what's going on, not just in the global perspective, but more importantly, North America, where a lot of our members are. I just completed actually last week in Vancouver, Washington State, my final 12th IUT, which is our industry update tour. We've had a lot of events at NACS, so our leadership forum down in Miami, which all the senior leaders from around North America and globally came over. We've had our state of the industry up in Chicago, which is super well attended, where we talk about the total numbers, what's happening in terms of growth, or what's happening in terms of categories, what's happening in terms of costs. And then really I've been out meeting members, just back from Greensboro, South Carolina this morning. So we were down with Spinks and looking at the marketplace, Quick Trip and Racetrack. And, last week I was actually in London. So I've been really on the road for 6 months solid, but it's been super valuable, Dan, because what I've learned is where we are and what's happening and who's making strides, who's doing well. I think it's pretty clear when you look at some of the public company results, and I'll call out Casey's in particular. Their results have been extraordinary. Right, just look at that quarterly performance, and even Yesway's IPO. There's tons going on here. It's quite exciting, and it's very aptly, food convenience is the big word still.
It is, and perhaps you'd like to jump in there, Elaine.
Yeah. So I'd love to ask both of you. Convenience retail, it's in the midst of a major transition. There's changing consumer needs. There's decreasing, reliance on traditional fueling. What do you see as the keys to success for retailers in this environment?
I'll go first, Elaine, if you don't mind. I mean, there's no doubt we're transitioning in fuel globally, and that'll happen in different places at different timelines. But the big, and it's not new message, it's one that's been consistent for the last 10, 20 years. Food convenience, food is absolutely driving footfall. It's driving that loyalty. It's driving that additional participation and stickiness with consumers. The best guys over here and globally are very big into it. They're looking after all the day parts, breakfast, lunch, take home, dinner, and they're doing a really good job. In actual fact, in my view, my professional view, and I've worked and run 100 different franchises in my Armark time, I think some of the operators are doing a better job at quick service food than some of the quick service restaurants. Now that's phenomenal because that gives them a huge economic advantage, because if they have a core fuel and they have a core convenience packaged goods and they layer on food, it's really making those locations work hard. It's making them super profitable. And you know what? If they get loyalty and technology right, which I'm sure Joe has a view on, very powerful combination, very exciting, and certainly I would predict great things ahead. And trouble for QSRs, but not convenience stores.
Yeah, completely agree. Thanks, Frank. And look, thanks for having me on the show today, Dan, Elaine. It's a pleasure. It's a podcast I've been following heavily for the last kind of couple of years. And self-confess, I'm a fairly newbie to the industry. So probably 2 years in the convenience kind of grocery space, and before that, very much F&B and hospitality, and then that's where certainly the business I'm at now focuses. It was very focused on QSR, fast casual, and digitalization within those verticals have been very prominent for many, many years. And if you take convenience, and I don't want to downplay this, 2-3 years ago, how many convenience stores had a digital footprint? I think we can all openly say very, very few. And so it's a bit of an open field. And if we look at consumers now, so take a millennial, a Gen Z, a Gen X, they are digitally native, they're socially influenced, and they are where their phones are. And what's more convenient than being sat at home Absolutely nothing. So how do you get to your consumer on a phone, sat at home, or in store on a phone or on a kiosk? You've got to link these digital channels together. And I'll use an example. You could walk into a service station that's got lots of chimney pots surrounding it. In that service station, you might have a Burger King on the left, and then you've got a convenience store on the right. Each of them are going to have kiosk screens. Each of them are going to potentially be on Uber, Deliveroo, Just Eat. They're going to have an application. They're going to have a website. They might have a QR code to order. This creates a whole combustion of complication and complexity to two parts. One, you either stay away from it and you don't move to where the consumer is going, or number two, you embrace it and get yourself a scalable platform to be able to grow and add all those relevant channels into place as and when you move. And look, again, Deliverect, this is where we sit today. We create scalable infrastructure where you can add digital channels into your existing technology stack. And we are seeing a very fast movement from QSR into retail, because obviously the two within food convenience are completely linking now. And Frank, your final words there were the QSRs should be worried. Yeah, absolutely, they should be worried. It's certainly gonna happen.
Well, that's the seamless, really. Elaine, just thinking about you've been doing a lot of interesting customer research recently, haven't you? Tell us about what the American consumer is saying about all this.
Yeah, so we recently commissioned a study of consumer loyalty in the convenience retail space in the US, and it found a couple of really interesting things. One is that while 3/4 of consumers reported that they are brand loyal, less than half are actually enrolled in any kind of loyalty program. The second thing that I thought was really interesting is that things like the consistency of the experience, the range and quality of the offerings, the cleanliness of the location, the reliability of the service, all of those things were very important drivers of loyalty, not just price. And then another interesting thing was that about a quarter of consumers reported visiting more convenience stores more than once a week, right? So these are really, power users of the convenience channel. And they reported that these experiential factors are even more critical to driving loyalty for them than for other consumers. So I think what you're both talking about is really important. Like, customers care about the customer experience. They want seamless interactions, and they want quality range of offerings, and food service plays a huge role in that.
Yeah, and it's obviously, if to Frank's point, if we're going to do well against quick service restaurants, we need those clean restrooms, don't we? We need those operational efficiencies. The digital piece, to your point, Joe, has to be seamless, and we have to take friction out. All those things have to be in place, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just heard something about someone saying that you could eat off the floor of a Buc-ee's bathroom, and that's part of what is the Buc-ee's magic, right? Is that they get people in the door, and the cleanliness is a huge piece of that.
Well, obviously we can look at a microcosm of the US market and see this shift happening. We can look at Europe, Joe. We were at Convenience Summit Europe in Warsaw, weren't we, just a couple of weeks ago, and everyone was talking about the same thing, food convenience in the European market as well. But from a NACS point of view, how are you helping the industry navigate this transition? Because it's a big ask, isn't it? It's a big shift in the industry.
It is, Dan. But as you know from the two competitions that you just run, right? So food convenience and smarter stores are actually everywhere in the world. So you're not seeing any one region dominate. So that pretty much tells me that all the innovation is happening everywhere, but you got to be on top of your innovation. So, one of the things that NACS and you, Dan, is you connect people. So this network we have where we're sharing knowledge, sharing best practice, and teaching people how to run their businesses better is the fundamental driver of success, if people listen, of course, and if they do some of the things. The other thing then that's super important for us then is that we create these touch points, so we have quite a few events that we run down. We can talk a bit about the ones coming up later on, but they allow people to come together, and senior leadership, talk to each other, share ideas and collaborate. And I was just sitting with Stuart Spinks last night, who's a legend in our industry in the US, and he's been part of study groups for years where peer sharing and just working on common things has been a cornerstone of their success, albeit The hardest part is actually the operational side, because you can have the ideas, but can you execute? And that's where the best guys come in. They are flawless at execution, and they're very clear what they want to do. But I'm quite excited because I see innovation everywhere. Our job, your job, is to make sure people have that information. What they do with it is their business, but the ones that listen the most and they execute well are the ones that are winning, Dan.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, interestingly, the Spinks guys were in London just a couple of months ago, and we were looking after them. We set them up with Marks and Spencers, and they were looking at what we call the sort of I guess viral food convenience that's going on in central London.
We said thank you. He was very appreciative of that.
Well, they're terrific guys, but I think it's really good to get this this global travel going on as well, and this collaboration happening globally, and it's definitely provides some of the answers, doesn't it? Absolutely. And Joe, just thinking about, do you? I mean, interestingly, Joe, you were saying you're relatively new to this industry, but you're in a way you're coming from exactly the right place, because you're coming from the quick service restaurant industry, which is where we need to learn from most. But what's your perception of how open this industry is around collaboration? Do you think it's because our perception, obviously, we've been in this industry too long to be objective, perhaps, but our perception is that it's very open.
Okay, so looking after a fairly large land space, and you definitely sense a fear of innovation and movement, transformation, like that's evident. You take like Germany as a perfect market; it just is not moving technology wise. And then we were in Poland 2 weeks ago, and because of macro conditions, take the immigration policy, the Ukrainian men obviously left off for war. They've been forced into adopting technology because they have no other choice. Every QSR you walk into has either got a kiosk or a QR. You can't see anyone actually working there. And then in every single convenience outlet, fuel station we went to, they had 1-2 people manning it max, and everything was used in regards to self-service. And they kind of forced into that avenue, but just taking that innovation, taking that movement, that transformation, this will happen. It doesn't necessarily need to be tepid and waiting. And QSR is so far forward, and convenience needs to jump and lobby this quickly. And you're still seeing, I'm certainly seeing across like Nordics and the DAC markets, just still a slow adoption to some of the digital aspects. But of course, there's some some great outliers who are doing it exceptionally well, and people just need to be a bit brave.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've spent a lot of time talking about food convenience. Let's and again, we're talking about Europe perhaps a bit. So we should also think about the changing forecourt offer, the EV transition, which is obviously quite probably some years ahead of the North American market, just in terms of EV adoption. And Elaine, Vontier have been very much aware and having a watching brief on this in the European market. We spent many visits together with Mark Morelli and team, looking at different operators in places like Norway and elsewhere. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, our perspective is that we're looking at a multi-energy future, and that there's no single winner. And so what we're trying to do then is build solutions that can span across the energy spectrum, right? So as the pace and rate of adoption for EV and other alternative fuels changes over time and in different places around the world, how can we make it easy for retailers to sort of future-proof their business and have scalable solutions that allow them to, continue to deliver excellent and consistent consumer experiences from a traditional fueling side, but also when it comes to EV and potentially other alternatives as well. But I'd love to hear, Frank, on your travels, what you've been seeing in terms of EV adoption and how that's shaping the industry and how NACS is reacting to that.
Yeah, listen, great, Elaine. What I would say is it's very uneven, right? So if you take the Scandics, Nordics, particularly Norway, huge adoption, and I think it's probably up at 95% of new vehicles are EVs or hybrids, which to me they pass through any of the doubts of wherever they're going. That's largely based on having a good network and having investment in good policy and certainly supports. We're not seeing that everywhere. I think, Dan, you've been over in China, so the Chinese are manufacturing their way into it. North America is entirely different because the adoption has been much slower. It's very patchy, and frankly, the sentiment isn't towards that. So it's going to be longer in terms of the the decline of ICE and, slower in terms of the adoption of EVs. Notwithstanding, I think there's a global number, about 25% of vehicles sold now are actually EVs or hybrids. So that's a big number. Now, in some cases it's 90, in some cases it's 5. So it's really all over the place. But I would say the work that you're doing, Elaine, in terms of creating solutions is helpful for the retailers, and you're putting it in, I suppose, a way that they can bring it into their business and start small but get bigger, and certainly create that customer, journey that's required for the consumers as they make the transition.
Yeah, and I think consumers are looking for uptime and consistency of experience, right? It's hugely important. We don't want it to be just, completely different from what they've experienced elsewhere.
No, you're right. It's about the equipment, it's about the technology, it's about the availability, all of that. That's the experience. So I think you've thought it through, and I was super impressed at your event in Tucson, to be honest, to see how well connected it is and how thought through. And, from an industry perspective, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
I mean, Brian Dollison, very well, Frank, the CEO of Maxwell, came out with something very interesting recently, which he said that, the food service category isn't just an important category, it's the business. And obviously that it's not just the business. Maxwell, obviously have got a very diverse business. But I think what he's saying is we have to emphasize and focus on this. And I suppose we were talking about mobility and the energy transition, but what we've seen in Europe is, as this does mature, food convenience really becomes center stage, because obviously you're looking at, in order to attract those customers and those drivers to your site, you've no longer you have less customers who are going to come to fill up their tanks with diesel and petrol, and so you really want to be a food convenience destination for those guys. So in a way, the best preparation for mobility transition when it comes, and obviously it will come much later in some markets than others, or maybe not at all, but the best way to prepare for that is to do probably what makes sense for your business anyway, which is to drive the food convenience proposition. Joe and Frank, perhaps you could comment on that.
And I'll come in first. I mean, I think, retailers have to learn to kick with both feet and dribble with both hands. That means they've got to be part of the energy transition. They've got to be part of any of that convenience store change, whether it's nicotine or any of those categories. And then more importantly, they've got to create this stickiness so that when people come on looking for food or drink, that they become the preferred destination, which then becomes the preferred destination for refueling and other convenience products. So I completely agree. And the ones that are doing it well are winning. There's no doubt about that. And certainly we've seen EV hubs spring up down around the world that haven't really worked without the amenity, and the amenity being food and beverage and some of those services that people want.
No, 100%. And Joe, perhaps you could come in. How do you see the next 12 months and industry needs from your perspective at Deliverect?
Oh, again, I mentioned greenfields a little bit earlier on. It really is. We're speaking to a lot of customers at the moment who are still not there with digitalization. They might be utilizing a singular channel to kind of transition off-premise. Remember, it's not just about on-premise, off-premise. You take the UK market, you got 50 million consumers placing an active order on these delivery channels on a monthly basis. You've got to be in front of it. And again, I mentioned that point of convenience. There's nothing more convenient than being sat at home. So it's just to embrace it and adopt it. And then, again, going back to kind of Frank's part, take like a Moto or a Welcome Break. They're almost becoming like market halls of old, where you turn up and there you have a list of all the different food options available: chicken, burgers, Mexican, what else, ever it may be. And they're making those kind of hub centers enjoyable to be. And you're having lots of families who are now doing outings there. And it doesn't sound particularly appealing. I'm going to the service station for my night out, but is it that unrealistic that actually does become a night out in the future? And I think we're just seeing that progress more and more and more.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, you've got Buc-ee's in the US, haven't you, Frank and Elaine?
Yeah,
We do. We're growing. I think they're adding another 10 or 15 in the next number of years. And even Dolly Parton's getting in on the act. She just opened one too.
I noticed. Yeah. And there's a lot of media attention. I think someone sent me an article in the Wall Street Journal about how sort of, our industry in the US is really sort of, getting interest from a food quality point of view at the roadside lane. You probably saw that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think some of these retailers are becoming destinations, and I think that's true in the US, but I've seen it in places like Ireland as well, actually, where, people are going out to the convenience store to have dinner with their families. And so I think you're starting to see that happen in a variety of different markets. But certainly Buc-ee's is a destination. People get married at Buc-ee's. People love Buc-ee's, so.
Well, we'll be in Buc-ee's and Wawa Sheets and Dashin ahead of the NACS show, but the NACS show I think is another destination you'll probably want to mention at the end of the podcast today, Frank.
Oh, I'm gonna mention it now, Dan. So it's the greatest show on earth. So between the 6th and the 9th of October in Las Vegas, you got to be there if you're in our industry. And I'd highly recommend the store tours in advance, because I've been to those stores you've mentioned, Dashin and Rudders. In actual fact, I was in Rudders last week, that Foodvenience winner, and it's even better now than it was 6-9 months ago. The guys in Dashin do a great job. So I would highly recommend, if you're in our business, get over to the NACS show, go do the store tours, go meet your peers, go learn, and then bring it back. See what you can do with kind of implementing some of those ideas in your own business to make yourself future-proof.
Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Frank. We'll see you at the NACS show. And we'll also see you on our study tours in Virginia as well, I think, for a little bit of time. And Joe, thanks for joining us today and joining the club, as it were. And I'm sure you'll be over at the NACS show as well. And Elaine, thank you very much for co-hosting the pod today.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, produced by Dan Munford, Jenna Ferguson, and Lorraine Evans. It is produced and edited and mixed by Carolyn Schneer, and music is provided by Jukebox Music. Learn more at globalconvenience.com.